Hi, Madeline.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Monia.
Hi.
I send you a message, chat. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Okay. I got my second vaccine.
The second?
Yeah,
So did I.
I mean, I didn't have any problem.
Good. Just a little bit.
Did you? Did you have it?
Yes, I did, but not too much problem.
Oh, you had too much problem? Yeah, a lot of people had problem. Well,
I didn't.
You
I did
didn't?
not. No.
Oh, okay, good. So I didn't have any problem. So that was good.
I had a terrible problem. $8.
Yeah, many people said so. My friend had some problem. The second one. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It is 7 o'clock, the 1st of March. And so we are starting with BCCO rehearsal, starting off on a Monday for repertoire. And so we are going to be looking at two new pieces, finishing, of course, we finished last week, of course, the Eric Whitacre Seal Lullaby, which is one of his first works early in his career. And then, of course, Morton Lordson.
There we are. Okay.
Manu Mysterio, which is, of course, a fantastic work. And let's see if I can mute everybody. There you go. Okay. So, and then we're looking at two new pieces. One is The Angel by Tina Anderson, also an English composer. And then we're also looking at Earth Song by Frank Ticelli. And, you know, there's a long history of English chamber choir works because a lot of the Renaissance works, a lot of the church works are beautiful from Byrd and the English tradition in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, especially 17th centuries, is especially strong. And so, as you know, boy choirs, English boy choirs are a big tradition. And there are a lot of schools that are modeled out of that sort of learning. And so a lot of repertoire that comes out of it. But the music of Tina Anderson, who is a composer out of England, she was somebody that was chosen by the Abbey Road recording studio, who's having an anniversary, and they had a big competition for a lot of different composers. And her work was premiered by the Eric Whitacre Singers. And so there's a direct connection, of course, between Eric Whitacre and Tina Anderson. And it's a really wonderful work that is new and is not very familiar to a lot of people. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time getting to know it. And the other one by, again, a not very famous composer, Frank Ticelli, but a beautiful work called Earth Song. And this is a work that Voces 8 made very popular because they have a beautiful recording of it. And Julia's going to take us through that in a little bit too. And so again, like last week, we discovered that even though a chamber chorus music has a lot of similarities, there's a lot of um, depth in these works that really make them very, very different. And you're going to find the same thing about these two pieces, because the topic for these two pieces is very, very similar. They both have to do with singing. The song of the earth and the angel and the voices and being sung to is a very big theme in that. So our goal is to have a warm up today, start looking at these pieces in depth to get an idea for what they are, and then of course start digging into it over the course of the next few rehearsals. These works are a little bit more approachable in terms of learning the notes. And so we might not spend the entire 5 weeks on them. If we get done with them early, we'll move on and maybe add some pieces in the semester, but depends on how much we go through, because again, they are very, very different than the last two pieces that we looked at. So I'm going to be leading this warm-up today, and then I'm going to be leading the work with Tina Anderson, the Angel, which was a new work to me before we started looking at repertoire for this semester, and it's just one of these pieces that I fall in love with. It's really fantastic. And then, of course, Julia's going to lead us through the Earth Song. So, warm up. You know, we just had a board meeting relatively recently, and we realized that unlike our normal rehearsals, we actually have a little bit more space all around us. And so I want to do a little experiment today where we actually, in our rooms, will try something very different. And I might, I wonder if I can do this in my place too. But what I want to do is, for us to lie down on the floor. We're going to do some breathing exercises that are not upright, that are actually laying down on the floor if possible. And so I'm going to try to do this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with this first, and then we'll continue with other stuff, more traditional stuff afterwards. So if there's, for some reason, inability to actually lie on the floor, then it'll be at the very beginning. So what I want you to do is be able to listen to me, but lie down on the floor. I see so many people looking at me very, very quizzically right now. So that's great. So what you're going to do is, and like I'm not going to be able to see your faces, but what I want to do is when we are standing upright, we have a lot of posture issues that arise. And when you're laying down on the floor, none of your posture issues affect your breathing. And so I want to see if we can do this. I'm going to like lie down on the floor. Oh, look at this. I can do this. And I'm going to put the computer next to my face so I can still see you. So what I want you to do is you're going to, if you have enough room, is lie down on the floor. And what you want to do is keep your hands by your side. You can put your knees up if you want to for back issues or whatnot. But what I want to do is I want you to focus on the breath. Because when you lie down on the floor and you breathe in and out, there is none of the up and down motion that you have to worry about, like going when you're standing up. All your breath is doing is from your belly button up. It's just breathing in a very natural way, and your shoulders never get involved. And so that's the sort of idea of what we want to do, is you want to be very aware of how still everything is when you breathe in and out. And then when you breathe and expand yourself, like really push to expand the breath, where does that happen, right? And the same thing happens, like put your hands on the bottom of your rib cage, not only the floating ribs, the ones that aren't attached, but actually at the bottom of the rib cage, right? And I want you to feel how still that actually is. When you're lying down like this, we have an inability to slouch. And as a result, your rib cage naturally finds its most ideal position, and your breathing doesn't change because of that. If you want to do an exercise too, put your hands on your shoulders. You have to cross your arms for this. And when you breathe in and out, you're going to find, again, the same thing, a stillness that happens. Your shoulders are not either hunched forward or pulled back. They're sort of in a very natural position for you to breathe in. Put your hands on your belly and just feel the natural breathing in and out. Remember that your lungs are not there, obviously, but that those are the viscera and your diaphragm pulling that area down so that your lungs can pull air into your body. And just like any meditation, be very aware of the breath in and out, in and out. Focus on the mechanism, what muscles are used or needed. And again, we don't think about our breath for 99% of the day. It's a involuntary, system at that point. And so when we start to sing, it becomes a voluntary engagement and control of your breath. And so being aware of those muscles, being aware of the system, being aware of the goalposts, the furthest out you can breathe out, the furthest in you think you can breathe in. Those are things to be in touch with so we're aware of it while we sing. And what I want to do is, one of our exercises that we normally do is that if you remember, obviously, when we speak normally and we breathe throughout the day, we tend to take very slow breaths inward. And especially when we talk, we exhale very quickly. And when we sing, we do the exact opposite. We want to take relatively quick breaths and then exhale slowly. So we're not as used to controlling the tempo of the air going out, the exhalation. So what we want to do is take a nice deep breath in. Don't worry about speed for that, but take a nice deep breath in and then slowly breathe out. And think about the muscles and the control you need for that. Again, breathing in at your own pace, but the goal is to breathe out slower than we normally do. And it really feels like my viscera really caves in when I breathe out. Again, on your own pace, just breathe in and then out. And then always, like meditation or yoga or whatever, you always want to breathe in through your nose. And the reason why we do that for singing especially too is that when you breathe in through your nose, naturally it starts helping the soft palate raise a little bit, like you're smelling something nice. And then out through your mouth, but slowly. Very relaxed and controlled. Relaxation. And so you see that this is actually a very natural process. As we've talked about sometimes in the past, babies and dogs manage to be some of the loudest things, especially small dogs, because they use their entire body, entire breath engagement to make sound. And over time, we sort of lose this ability to do this. We lose the ability to engage and fully engage our body. And so what we're trying to do is get back in touch with this. And so being aware of this is very useful. This is a good exercise to do on your own too, not only for relaxation, but just for breath. We know that our bodies naturally relax when we slow our breathing down. We know that it slows our heart rate. It's part of our parasympathetic system that helps reduce stress and helps us calm and reduce the anxiety that we might have, especially present today. So let's go back to a more normal breath routine and warm up. So you can go back to sitting in your seat or standing. But again, try to incorporate this if you can. I've been trying to do this more often because, again, because our stress levels throughout the day, heightened stress levels, our baseline stress level tends to be heightened. Controlling your breath and being in touch with your breath is not only good on a physiological and health benefit, but also it prepares us for rehearsal now. We're not doing things all together, so we don't have the example of all the people next to you to try to engage with this. And so it's really on your own. Now, if you're seated, you want to make sure that you don't lose a sense of posture. And if you have the ability to stand where you are, that's fantastic. You want to make sure that we really get this posture. And what we're going to do now is do sort of the same natural feeling of what our body does at its most practical and pragmatic level. So what we want to do is focus on our jaw and our skull. Remember that the jaw is a hinge. It just goes back and down. but that also that our head, our cranium, is on top of our spinal cord, right? A spinal column, not the cord. Well, I guess it's on the cord too, but it's really a spinal column. But the thing is that we have a tendency to raise our jaw and tilt our head back often. And that sort of squeezes the back of your neck. And what we want to do is elongate the back of your neck, because what that's going to do is that's going to reduce this tension that you have on these muscles right here in your throat. So if I talk and I sing, ah, do you hear that stress that comes into the sound? Ah, that's an extreme level. But what you want to do is make sure that never happens on any minute level. So you really want to think of elongating the back of your neck, even if that feels like your head is actually tilted slightly forward. And the same thing for your jaw. The jaw is controlled by muscles, very strong muscles, obviously, because of eating, you know. And what you want to do is, we only talk like this, right? But our jaw can really open up quite a bit. And so we want to very gently relax and open your jaw and get it used to sort of that open feeling. Now, only because I was watching it, and it just happened to be the topic of the day of many memes and everything. But the Conservative Political Action Conference, whatever, the CPAC, right? The young woman that was singing the national anthem that was in many, many different keys. And it's perfectly fine. We shouldn't make fun of her because she sang out of tune. But she had amazing space and openness. And if you watch her singing, her jaw is open and relaxed the entire time. She's like, oh, say, can you see? And she had amazing space when she was singing. And so that's sort of what we want to emulate. We really want to get to the openness, because the more open your jaw is, the more space that you have in your, cranium, in your cavity in your head, and the more resonant the sound is. And so you want to really create that space by tilting your head slightly down, opening up your jaw and pulling it back and in, and then naturally, like you yawn, stretch that soft palate. So we have the stretch up, and we have the jaw down. And again, we don't talk like this at all. But when we sing, that's how we sing, to try to get a more resonant sound, like we're orating, right? Again, we're not talking like this. We don't want to sing like this. We want to open up our jaw to get resonance. So let's start putting these things together. The space plus the support, and start creating some sound. So let's do some humming first while chewing. Let's do middle register and lower and then higher. Now what I want you to do is, even though it's silly, the reason why we chew is to try to not lock our jaw, but to keep it loose. And the reason why we hum is because it's actually very soft engagement of your vocal folds. So even though it sounds silly, we say, hey, it's like you're chewing a bagel, and you're like, that's really yummy and all that kind of stuff. It really has a lot of direct impact. So what I want to do is a very clean glissando up and down. Up and down like that. Just do that on your own time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn that into a sort of mini relaxed siren, like it's a sigh, but it's also going to go up too. And I want you to think is, when you go up, I want you to think, I'm going to go to the side here, then you go, that the sound comes from back here over your head all the way through. So you're not going, like up in jaw, like we said, your head tilts backwards. But actually, to get higher, you actually have to lift in the back more. So let's do the side together. And again, it's not supposed to be really engaged. It's supposed to be breathy. It's supposed to be light. We're just warming up our voice. So let's go down and very gently, we're going to go on a hum. And I want you to think of your mouth cavity open as possible, but you gently close the lips, but keep the space. So not, but you see my jaw is actually dropped quite a bit. Not, let's try this, okay? And down. Now, to me, that actually starts buzzing here for some reason. What we're going to do is we're going to change that, and we're going to do the same thing, but your lips are going to be a little bit more open. Ooh, so not ooh, but jaw, drop jaw. Ooh, very tall ooh. Okay, same exact exercise. Ooh. You see, I actually went like this for a second, then I corrected myself. Ooh, I dropped my jaw and dropped my gaze a little bit too, right? And ooh, nice breath. Ooh, last one. Great. Now, we start changing and we start developing a little bit more ping. That's to create space. Now we try to create focus. So we have support, space, and now we focus. It's like laser beams, right? You have the thing generating the energy, and then you have to focus the laser beam. And what we want to do is want to get a lot of ping in our squillo. That means Italian means mask. It's like right here. You know, this is hard. This is very soft. Your tongue is very soft. You know, buzzing in your teeth probably isn't a very good thing. We have better bones to help out with this. And so what we're going to do is Now, A is a very pingy sound. And can be lots of things because the way we pronounce as Americans is all over the place. Right? And so what we want to do is get something that's a little bit less in the back of our throat, like but with teeth, upper teeth showing, and again, and forward sound. Forward sound. You want to throw the sound outwards. As opposed to not but okay? Everybody say like you're gonna take a bite of an apple. You say that's the type of thing you want. Okay. Here we go. As you go up, don't get spacer. Drop out if it's too high. And then what we want to do is we want to create a little bit of sound that's a little bit relaxed so that nothing is too tight. So we're going to go ya, the same space as we did before. And then when you hit those top notes, you want to be like not nothing very sort of patronizing, but very light and joyous. We call it jokoso, which means like joking or joyous. Scherzando is joking. Okay, here we go. On ya, so ya. Here we go. And ya. So now that if you're by yourself at home, then you can try out those high notes and go for it. If you're with other people in the house, fine, go for it too. See what they say. So that's a nice sort of relaxed. Let's do a sigh. You know, when I was a conducting student and they said, hey, I want you to do a warm-up for next week, you know, I'd been in chorus for many, many years. And then I had to think to myself, wait, what goes into a warm-up? You know, you do all these exercises, but you don't realize what they're actually for. And so for me, there's sort of now 4 major areas of warm-ups. One is, of course, to get in touch with body systems that we naturally do use every day, but don't think about them, and to really be in control of them. One is, and the next one is to control the breath and really get capacity for breath. The next one is to get space, and then the next one is to get focus in the sound. Because the way we speak is in the back of the throat as Americans. And Europeans, they actually speak quite a bit further. So that's why the French, they, you know, like when we say a schwa, you know, say, like you don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. That's in the back of your throat. For French people, they say, qu'est-ce que tu as dit? It's actually very forward. And it's the same thing. The vowels tend to be much more forward. And for Americans, we tend to speak in the back of our throat often. And so we have to work against that to actually get into the forward part of our mouth, to where the ping is, right? And the same thing for our breath. We have to be able to control our breathing, whereas most of the day we don't control it at all. And the same thing for space, like we talk about your jaw, we only use this much space, but when we sing, we use like that much. And we're not used to them. So the part of the warm-up is really to get in touch with these systems, to reconnect with it, to get your voice ready, and you mentally prepared for the rehearsal as well. So we're going to move on to repertoire. And so what I'd like you to do is take out The Angel by Tina Anderson. And whether you have electronic copy or a physical copy, I want you to turn to the last page. Last page first, because the last page is where the poem that this is based off of comes from. And there's a setting of this beautiful poem by a Russian poet. And I want to spend a little time talking about it first before we actually look at the music, because it's very telling how the music is set. And sometimes we look at the score first. There's lots of ways to look at new works, just kind of dive in. Sometimes we sort of look at, just listen to a recording. But since music with text is inspired by the text, I thought I might look at it first. So I'm going to read it first because it takes a little bit of time to interpret this. And so maybe we can have a discussion about what we think this means. Because I actually thought it meant something very different until I started analyzing it and doing some research on it. So it'd be interesting for people's thoughts. So I'm going to read it first. And it's by Mikhail Lermontov from the 19th century, early 19th century. He didn't live very long. If you can see that he only lived, I think he was 29 years old. But the text says, The Angel. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently down towards the earth. But the moon and the clouds upon their nightly watch perceive his celestial song. He sings of the sin-free souls and how they dwell in peace within the paradise garden groves. He sings of the Lord Almighty, and his praise flows through this night asleep. He carries in his arms a restless soul to life's despair and faults, but something in his song remains in wordless keep within the soul. And long she suffers in this world of despair, but with a strange yearning worn, and it never fades, that tone from God, with its mournful sounds of the world. So, put into chat, maybe, your thoughts of what this poem might be about. And I'm going to give you a little clue, not a clue, but a little tidbit. There was an additional verse that was cut from this that actually gives a lot more context from it. But I'll tell you what I thought initially at first, before I saw the word she. I thought it was actually Lucifer coming down from heavens and thinking about the paradise that was lost, right? But I would love to know your thoughts about what this poem might be about. Jane says, never despair, and separation is only for now. That's great. We have memory of heaven. Sounds like a woman mourning the loss of her lover. Yes. There's certainly a sense of loss there that's very prevalent, right? Anybody else? I just love the imagery. Like if you think of the first paragraph, out of the midnight sky, like the darkness, the angel soars silently down through the earth. But the moon and the clouds upon their nightly watch perceive his celestial song. Inner song is reachable if to stop and listen. There's hope, grace from I think spirituality or someone dying, hope in the celestial song. The juncture between the ideals in which we aspire to and reality. Well, that's a great one. Comforting thing of love's lost ones can visit in the arms of an angel. That's the song. Who is he and who is she? That's true. Good questions. Really great questions. And if you look at the second stanza, he sings of the sin-free world and how they dwell in peace within the paradise garden groves, like that peace within heaven. He sings of the Lord Almighty, and his praise flows through this night asleep. It's clear that he, the angel, is separate from paradise at that point, separate outside of heaven. An angel brings our soul to earth where we are born. Yeah, that's an excellent one. Spirituality, wife is despair, hope from angels to heal. I think that one about the soul to earth when we're born is really getting there, because he carries in his arm a restless soul to life's despair and faults, but something in the song remains in wordless keep within the soul. Then the next, I might type this out. The next stanza after the third stanza is the soul settled in earthly creation, but the world was alien to her. About one, she dreamed all about the sounds of saints, not remembering their meaning, sorry. And so let me read that again. The soul settled in the earthly creation, but the world was alien to her. About one, she dreamed all about the sounds of saints, not remembering their meaning. And then I'll read the last stanza. And long she suffers in this world of despair, but with a strange yearning worn, and it never fades, that tone from God, with its mournful sounds of the world. And so I think somebody mentioned about an angel bringing a soul that's born on earth. But that soul that's born remembers that song of heaven and paradise. And what they say, what is that Buddhist saying? Life is suffering because it's contemplation of meaning of life. It's as if we recollect that song in parts of our soul and are always striving for it. And we have an unease because we're always trying to seek it and find it. And so this is a beautiful poem that talks about, souls that come down from heaven and that are in all of us, seeking sort of that paradise that we've recollected, we hear as if somebody was singing to us. And so that idea of song and voice and hearing and calling is very important. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to play the piece, but I don't want you to look at the music at all. I want you to only look at the text of the poem. And I'm going to tell you flat out that it might be a little hard sometimes because Tina, the composer, goes back on some words and sometimes has two lines going at the same time, which sort of interfere with each other. What I want to do is I want you to see how she sets the music. And, some of the music is just a straight saying of the single line. Some of the music stops on single words. And I want you to just listen to the work without looking at a single note, but only seeing the poem as if you were the composer and saying, what words, what lines do I want to be important and held out longer? What ones do I want to pass over? And how would I sit here and say, these are the most important things in the poem that I connect to and I want my music to connect to? So I'm going to try to share this, and this is not on an MP4, so it's going to be an MP3, so it might be a little funny. But one second. I smell somebody burning toast, so I'm just trying to make sure that the house is not burning down. Okay, where is this music? Share sound. Again, just looking at the text of the words, and let's listen to this music together. And just making sure that I'm sharing sound. Yes, sharing sound. Original sound is off. Here we go. Nope. C'est quoi ça? No, I don't want to try that now. Not now. It's a really incredible work. It's a really, really effective work. And again, it's a little hard to perceive the words. So if you had trouble following the poem in various places, don't worry, because oftentimes she had two lines going at the same time that kind of interfered with each other. And then at the very end, the last stanza, sorry, not the last stanza, the last verse in the music actually used various little lines to in the entire poem. And so it actually deviated from the structure of the poem itself and added a whole extra last section. So, you know, to me, the way composers obviously set their music, we can really tell what they're trying to bring out. What words are longer than others, what words have more emphasis and time or longer chords. I want to play again the very beginning, but this time I want you to look at the music as we go along. And you can look at it too right now. I mean, like, let's look at the music for a second. The very first page. And then you see that the very first page of the music is really interesting because we have some high sopranos, which are just some individual lines. We have soprano 1 and 2, so there's soprano divisi. There's alto 1 and 2, tenor 1 and 2, bass 1 and 2. There's no piano reduction, oh my goodness. But you see that the music, alto 2, soprano 1, tenor 1, they have single lines. They just sing a C the entire time. And the tenor 2s and the alto 1s have the music, right? The moving line. They're almost completely independent from each other. They don't line up with anything. The notes they don't necessarily clash, but they certainly don't align with each other. And the word is just a straight first line. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently towards the earth. The next page, but the moon and the clouds upon their nightly watch. Then what happens? All the voice parts, except for the super, super high solo sopranos, sing Perceive His Celestial Song. Right? And then you see that. It's a complete change in texture. So I want to play the very beginning again, and I want you to hear those words that suddenly take on more importance. Oh, what happened to the music? MP3, share, let's share. So sharing is caring. Oh wait, no, stop. Arrête. Okay, here we go. So this time I'm going to share with the music. Mit Musik. Just watch along with your music as we play. Completely different texture.
It was where in the economic cycle I started the business. Booms go bust and busts recover, says Gil. Costs are low, the unemployed are cheap.
And so you see that of those words, out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently down towards the earth, but the moon and the clouds upon their nightly watch. And then she highlights, perceive his celestial song, as if we are literally creating the celestial song. The chorus is creating a completely different texture. And so we go on. Let's look at page 4. Oh, sorry, not page. That is page 4. And so she repeats a little bit. And the moon and the clouds upon the nightly watch, and out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the moons and clouds on their nightly watch perceive his celestial song. Okay. So she goes on to the next verse. Page 6 into 7. He sings of a sin-free soul and how they dwell in peace within the paradise, garden groves. Next page, page 8. He sings of the sin-free souls and how they dwell in peace within the paradise, garden groves. Repeat. He sings of the Lord with the full chorus, this time things. And again, there's that sort of parlando, we call it in music, sort of the spoken sung version, where we just kind of speak through. He sings of the sin-free souls and how they dwell in peace within the garden groves. But he sings of the Lord Almighty, suddenly has this full chords of on page 9, bar 31. Page 9, bar 31, you see every single voice part, including the basses, are divided in 4. The basses have 4 parts. You know, of the mighty, and he sings. So, those 2 lines so far that she's highlighted, his celestial song, and he sings of the Lord Almighty. You can see the music. She's literally creating the music that the angel sings through the chorus, through you, right? Continuing on, page 10, in the middle of the page. But the moon and the clouds upon their nightly watch. Oh, that's music. That's words from the first stanza, right? Perceive his song, celestial song. The same thing. When we get to singing about the celestial song, the chords open up. The chorus opens up. The voices open up, right? And then page 12. Through this night asleep. And finally, we get to the 3rd verse. He carries in his arms a restless soul to life's despair and faults, but something in his song remains in his soul, in wordless keep within the soul. And long she suffers in world of despair. Oh, the song's not here. The song did not appear in that 3rd verse. Did you see that? We had, in the first verse, perceive his celestial song. In the 2nd verse, he sings of the Lord Almighty. But when we talk about he carries in his arms a restless soul of life's despair and faults, but something of his song remains in wordless keep within the soul, it's not quite there yet. And long she suffers in this world of despair, but with a strange yearning worn, and long she suffers in world of despair, the tone from God Almighty on page 17. The tone from God Almighty is full and dissipates, and long she suffers in the world. And then page 18, and never it fades, that tone from God, and remains within her soul. So the way she creates that song that the angel sings, that we as a chorus create those celestial sounds, is if those echoes remain in our human souls as sung by the angels. And so you go on page 20 and 21. This is that extra music that, you know, the poem is already done, but she has echoes of it long before. But if you go to page 22, the same thing again. Remains in the soul his celestial song, with that very difficult soprano line, his celestial song, and then the very last part of it, song throughout sleep. And then asleep, we still have the full chorus singing, as if the Seal's Lullaby, the same thing, that we're comforted by the paradise that we have dreams of, that we seek. And it's not the most, you know, the basses have a low D, like we had in the Magnum Mysterium or Magnum Mysterium of Lortzen. And it's not quite resolved because we're still living, right? But we have echoes of those angels' song. And she so beautifully creates that song within the chorus, within all of us. And so it's a really beautiful work. It's not what we call the neo-romantic. There's a sort of 21st century neo-romanticism that's happening in choruses nowadays, choral music nowadays. And that is very much the Eric Whitacre. That is still the more Lauritsen. But this is a very different, very specifically created piece that's a little less sort of reliant on sort of pleasing harmonies and is very much structured in the way, because all the pleasing harmonies would sort of destroy the content of the piece, which is that there's this unsettledness, there is this life is suffering, this contemplation of our existence. But we have echoes of that paradise that we're always seeking. And so there are certain points in the music where we seek that, we find these huge chords that we build, and it's going back to that over and over again. And so we have two different types of singing in this. We have that sort of very free cadenza-like singing, like in the very first page. Out of the midnight sky, the angel soars silently towards the earth, but the moon and the, so you have that very chant-like quality to it. And then you have music that is very vertical, where it's literally all the voice parts singing together in huge chords. And even though those chords are there, like we said, they aren't quite settled. So it's a gorgeous piece. It's a really meaningful work, and philosophically has a lot to talk about. Everything that everybody's mentioned is, feelings of loss, feeling of connection, feeling of more religious connotations. I mean, there are so many things to find personal meaning to connect to with this. To me, I always connect to the sort of structure of what composers have, because the poetry is beautiful by itself. The music can sometimes detract from poetry, can sometimes just be inconsequential. But to me, there's a definite viewpoint that the composer is telling us and showing us through how she's setting the music. And the way she's doing it is gorgeous, and it's a completely different entity that doesn't take away, it doesn't change the message of the poem, and they exist side by side, both beautiful. And so that's what I think is really important about this piece. So I can't wait to go through it. I think maybe we should take a tiny break now, and then we're going to learn some of it and try to do some singing of this. But let's take 5 minutes, and so we'll stop at 7:55, and we'll come back at 8 o'clock. But feel free to unmute and chat. I'm going to get some more water, and I will be back in a second. I'll be back in precisely 5 minutes.
Does anyone here know Russian?
No.
I'd really like to know what someone knows about the translation here.
I was wondering the same thing.
Who was that?
Janet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There's a lot of nuances in here that probably could be translated a little differently.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Russian.
I have a Russian friend I could ask.
Oh, good idea.
You'd have to get hold of the
write
text.
original poem.
Lermontov was pretty respected poet, wasn't he? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. In fact, yeah, I bet she could find that poem in the original Russian.
I
oh,
just
that'd
looked
be
it up,
great.
and there's quite a different translation. So
What?
there's quite a different translation. I just looked it up because I wanted to see the missing lines.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I don't know who translated this, but there's another translation by somebody else.
Yeah, I'm
Obviously.
sure there are many. But
Actually, it's funny because I went to this sort of Zoom performance, and there was I think it was a Russian song that somebody sang and gave the translation. And I think she might have even pasted in like the Russian, characters, so the original Russian. And I sent it to my friend Johnny, and she said, "Oh, that translation is terrible."
Mm.
So it
So
could
for
very well be.
example, the last lines of this other translation, the last two lines, the one we have says, "And never it fades, that tone from God with its mournful sounds of the world." Here it is. "And earth's boring songs could not ever replace the sounds of heaven it lost."
Very good. I'm glad we did go with that one.
Mm.
Some translators
really?
try to make the rhyme, and some translators try to capture the mood, and
Yeah, yeah,
they go all over the place.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that sort of makes sense because this last line is kind of weird. It's like, never it fades that tone from God with its mournful sounds of the world. It sounds like the tone from God has mournful sounds of the world.
Yeah.
which kind of-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I take that to mean, I mean, there's so much tension between what's heard and unheard in this poem that the angel is singing silently, and only the moon and clouds can perceive, maybe not even hear, his song. And his wordless song remains with her. And well, her just means the soul. The soul is grammatically female. And so there's just a pure tone from God remaining, not words, not a song, but it manifests itself through the sounds of the world. And you have to find, you know, God's tone within the sounds of the world. There's no other way.
Mhm.
So the other translation, you can hear him. Softly he sang in his flight,
Oh, not silent, huh?
not silently, and clouds and stars and the moon in a throng hearkened to that holy song.
Mm. Very different. Sounds like a poem.
Yeah.
You know, there's a book.
Yeah, well, that translation is keeping the rhyme.
I might have mentioned this in BCCO rehearsals before. I haven't. I forget if I did, but there's this author, Douglas Hofstetler, who won a Pulitzer for Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is this brilliant work that connects Gödel, Escher, and Bach. You know, just a mathematician, artist, and a musician, and makes all these connections between the various genres and whatnot. But he had this fantastic book called Le Tombeau de Machel. And it's not tombeau, like a grave, but it's le tone, like beautiful sounds of Marot, the poet. And there's this poem by Marot that was in French, and it had a rhyming scheme, and you know, it's a famous poem in French. And he sent it to a billion different of his colleagues and out into the world, and he said, "I want you to translate this as best you can, and just send it to me." I didn't tell him how to translate that. And that's one of the big issues about translation. So like, what do? Do you try to do something that keeps its rhyming scheme? How important is that to that, right? Or is the word by word, like the actual meaning of the words, more important? And if it doesn't rhyme, that you have to do what you have to do, right? And so it's this phenomenal book because all his colleagues sent back completely different translations, and he goes through analyzing every single one. And one of the fun stories he talks about is that his book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, was translated into Japanese. And there's these American idioms that he used, like, you know, I don't know, whatever, you know, some like phrases and turns phrases. But instead of finding the Japanese equivalent, they actually just translated the English words of the idiom. And he said, I don't understand, but there has to be some Japanese equivalent for that sort of idiom. And they said, no, we kind of like that because it has that sort of American flair to it. It's like your idiom. Even if people sort of don't have as much of the deep understanding of it, it sort of gives a character of the author that wrote it, right? And, you know, there's this, Verdi wrote Otello, the opera, and it uses, well, Shakespeare, obviously, but it uses an Italian that is archaic. And I was studying Italian at the time, and I sat there and I said, I'm going to correct Italian. That's just wrong. That's just wrong. I don't understand. That's just wrong. And one of the coaches that I went to was just like, oh, but that's exactly the point. It's supposed to be archaic, just like Shakespeare. You know, like the way that Shakespeare uses his words is obviously not the most, you know, natural nowadays, you know, like it's just of its time. And so if you correct the Italian, that's like creating Shakespeare to be more contemporary speech. You could do it, but that's not the intention, right? And so it's this really interesting way. So, you know, like the translation is a big issue because, you know, these words mean very specific things to us and have connotations, but in Russian, like these words can have actually different meanings, right? I mean, they could have different connotations directly to us. And so that's part of the fun, I think, of translation. You know, or trying to read something in its original language. It's like, yeah, you can translate and you can understand it in your initial language, but you also have to know the context that the word has nowadays. You have to have the context of what those words have, you know, and that's a harder thing to do. That's a really much harder thing to do. Yeah, I don't know. It's really fascinating. Okay, we're back. So why don't we do a little bit? What I'd like to do is look at the first page, and every single verse in the poem has different voice lines that have the quote parlando aspect to it, that sort of chant like, slightly out of time, spoken and sung at the same time line. So I'm going to look at the alto 1 line that I want all of us to do, because at some point every single voice part is going to have something like this. So I want to just talk about this. So looking at this. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the. We're just going to stop there. We can say moon if you want to, but it's but the, right? Sorry, I have to do this because write Italian with those essentials gives it agility. I have to say, this is my favorite thing about Italian. Remember that Italy was a whole bunch of city-states, right? That all had their own dialects of Italian. And so they sat there and they're just like, if we're going to unify this country, how could we possibly choose an Italian that doesn't favor one region over the other? And so they said, let's go to the most famous poet, Italian poet, Dante, and just use his Italian as the national unifying language for all the regions. And so that's why their language is so beautifully phrased, and we think about sung Italian and everything, is because they picked a beautiful poet's, you know, syntax and language to be their unifying national language. It was one of my favorite stories of linguistics and history, etymology or history of language, I guess. Any case, let's look at this. So out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently towards earth, but the moon. You can feel free to end the line, but the moon. I want you to say that to yourself and do it like it's dramatic. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently down towards the earth. But the moon, you know, again, this is a little weird to stop there. And then try it a couple of times and focus on different words. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently down towards the earth. But the moon, and the clouds, whatever. And what happens is that certain words jump out a little bit more. You don't want to say, out of the midnight sky, an angel soars. That doesn't make any sense, right? So there's a little bit of hierarchy, those words that have a little bit more color or content. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently down towards the earth. But the moon and the clouds, there's lots of ways to try this. So I would experiment with this. And then when we start singing it, those words and the specific syllables, midnight sky, we actually have to put a little bit more emphasis on those two. So you don't want to sing, out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... It's really boring, right? There's no sort of phrasing, there's no crescendo, decrescendo, there's no meaning in the words. And so when we have music with this, that's our, again, parlando, which is half spoken, half sung, we have to have a certain idea of what words we want to bring out, words we don't. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... So you have direction for it. So let's sing this together. And what I want you to do is I'm going to play the notes, but what I want you to do is put a little accent or make louder the words that you want to bring out. And again, I'm going to do mine as an example first. You can do something completely different. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the moon... Right? And the line continues. So for me, I brought out midnight, I brought out soars. You might want to bring out angel or sky or towards the earth. Let's do that together. Again, I'm going to play the notes, but I want you to sing the line and bring out the words that you think are most important. I'll give you, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, da, da, as if there's no fermata. So count the first line is out Out of the midnight. Okay, all right, here we go. 1, 2, breathe. Out of the midnight sky. Now, we're not doing any rubato, but there's already a lot of area for us to be expressive. You know, out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the moon. And take a breath where you need to. I took a breath like 3 times. Julia could probably do it on 1 breath. You know, she's great like that. But let's try that again. Here we go. Again, out will be 3 beats. 1, 2, breathe. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the moon. Right? So when we look at music like this, the parlando section, that's how we practice it. Opera singers, when they have lines, will do this a billion different ways, just like actors try out their lines a billion different ways to see what feels best, what feels the best for its meaning. So that's essential part. We didn't even talk about rubato. Okay, so that's one of the areas. Now the other way to approach this is exactly the opposite. Now the problem with parlando is that we have a tendency to sing it like we speak. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth. Not using our jaw very much, not having a sung tone. So what I want to do is sing it on the same pitch. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... And I want you to focus on that sung sound that's open and spacious, and is not about emphasis or the words, but creating the right vowels and sung tone. And what we're going to do is try to marry the two of those. The meanings of the words and what has emphasis and what doesn't, but still have the sung tone. So let's sing this on the same note. Out of the midnight, with very open jaws, with beautiful sung tone, but on the same tone. To remember that we're singing this and that we're just not speaking it. Here we go. 1, and very slower too. 1, 2, 3. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... And then you realize you don't sing the, you sing the, like THA. The, and then of is not of, but of. Again, AHV. Of the midnight sky. So when you put them together, out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... You have the sung tone, but you have the phrasing as if we're speaking it. Let's try that together out to 1 line. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth, but the... Right? Now, last thing, the composer herself has highlighted 3 words. Specifically, we know it the way she wrote it. What are those 3 words? What do you think those 3 words are? How can you emphasize words in music? And she actually does it in 2 different ways, right? There are 3 words that she highlights. Soars, definitely, because soars has 2 notes on it. Soars. And the earth has 2 noodle bars on it. And the other one is just out, right? Out of the midnight sky an angel soars silently towards the earth. So, we already have some of the words that she wanted to emphasize. So we need to build that into it. Soars silently towards the earth. Soars towards the earth. The earth. You know, it's really beautiful the way it works. The last thing that I'll say is that we didn't talk about rubato. but she actually writes in some of it too. If you look at the very top of the stave, where the high sopranos are, there's tempo markings that say poco accelerando and a retardando. Out of the midnight sky, an angel soar silently towards the earth. But you can see that there's a little bit of a spinning sound, as if we're descending, right? As if the speed is increasing. Or like Perseverance towards Mars, breaking through the atmosphere, there's a fiery, entrance. But regardless, there's a lot of clues that the composer wrote into this. It's a beautiful work, and I honestly can't wait to dive into it deeper. We're doing a deep dive right now that doesn't have a lot of singing because we're going to do that next week. Because, again, the rehearsal process is whole parts whole. We look at the whole work to get an idea of what it is. Then we look at some of the parts to figure out how she did it. And then we put it back together at the end, like last week. So I hope you're excited about this piece because, again, when I listen to the poem, when I hear the poem, read the poem, and I listen to the music, it's really, really beautiful and effective. Very powerful work. And there's a lot of discussion. So I know that we didn't spend that much time looking at some of the music, but I hope you're excited to dive into it with me. So I'm going to pass it on now to Julia, who is going to be looking at the Earth Song by Ticelli. And this is a gorgeous work that is in that neo-romantic style that, like I mentioned, the Whitaker and the Lauritsen are at. But Julia, all yours. I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. Hello. Happy Monday, everybody. So go ahead and, well, you don't necessarily have to pull out the Earth Song yet, but we are now making a transition from celestial singing and song now to the Earth songs, just as the angel came out from the sky. And now we are now down on the Earth. So let's begin talking about the Earth Song actually with another discussion. Thank you, Catherine, for a nice segue. Let's start with the discussions question. So please post in the chat, what does the word sanctuary mean to you? What are some maybe words that you might consider are descriptive of that word, or images that come to mind like synonyms or anything? The word sanctuary, what does that mean to you? Seeing safety, Notre Dame, holy, safe place, a protected place, safe haven, lots of safety, a lot of safety. Excellent, yeah. A refuge, it's a great word. Refuge, protection, safety, sacred, spiritual place. So it seems like we're all kind of along the same idea here. Hidden, secluded, comfort. I love this. I love that we all are on the same page about this word and the meaning, excuse me. So I want you to kind of keep that in your mind as we continue to talk about this song and about the composer. So our composer, Frank Ticelli, I think, I watched an interview and they called him Ticelli, so I think that's his pronunciation of his last name, but he is an American composer who grew up in the musical scene in New Orleans and then also in the band scene of Texas. And he studied composition, and he actually received his master's in music from University of Michigan and his doctorate. So that was a cool fun fact to find out. But he is known mainly actually for his works for concert band and for wind band. And in 2005, our composer, Ticelli, wrote a commissioned work for concert band in honor of a dear friend of his who was a director of a concert band. And he titled it Sanctuary. And I'd like for us to listen to a couple of minutes of it together. And yes, I know that we are not a concert band, but there is a method here, so please bear with me. But as we listen to it, I want you to think about what you hear. Like, does this piece conjure an image of sanctuary, of safety, as we were all thinking? Like, does it conjure the image of sanctuary? And if so, how? Like, what are some musical aspects that conjure this idea for you? Is it the notes? Is it the harmony, the rhythmic harmony? So like how fast it moves or how slow it moves, the tone, the instruments that get isolated and highlighted at any given point, the color of the instruments as well, phrasing, etc. So what are some musical things that achieve this idea. So let me go ahead and share the sound here, and let's listen to this. Type things into the chat as it comes up to you, or you can kind of spend the next couple minutes just listening. This is a longer piece. We won't listen to the whole thing, but just part of it. And here we go. I'm so sorry to stop it there because it's so beautiful, but it is a long, long song, or piece, I should say. And I think that based on all the really great comments that everyone is posting, we're all getting a really kind of calm, contemplative, pastoral feeling, a very warm feeling, a feeling of safety and relief arriving home, as everyone has been sharing. So this feeling of warmth, especially when the low brass came in, right? And then especially when we had the kind of higher voices, so the woodwinds, for example, playing, it's everyone was posting saying, now it sounds a little bit more contemplative and introspective. So those are some of the feelings that I think also reflect what we were saying sanctuary means to us as well, a feeling of safety and warmth and contemplation and meditation and arriving home. So with this in mind, if you don't know Earth Song, you might be wondering why I shared this wonderful concert band piece with you. But here we go now. So after Tekeli composed this work in 2005, he realized that it almost had like this very nice vocal quality to all of the lines, as I'm sure you all probably heard. And he was inspired to adapt this concert band piece and the musical material for chorus. So that's where Earth Song comes in. So he actually took the music that he wrote here for this concert band piece and wrote a poem and the lyrics himself, aiming to reflect the lyricism of the music in his text. So let me now share my screen to show you the poem, and let's read that together. You probably have this in your music, so you can just turn to your music if you want to take a quick look away from the screen for a second. But it's right on the inside cover of your music here. And let's just, there we go. Let's just read this together. So this is the text that Tekeli wrote that he felt inspired to write to kind of reflect the musical themes and ideas that he wrote originally. So here we go. We have sing, be, live, see. This dark, stormy hour, the wind it stirs, the scorched earth cries out in vain. O war and power, you blind and blur, the torn heart cries out in pain. But music and singing have been my refuge, and music and singing shall be my light. A light of song, shining strong, alleluia. Through darkness, pain, and strife, I'll sing, be, live, see, peace. And these are the lyrics of Earth Song that we will learn and learn together over the next few weeks. So I think this is really interesting, the direction that Tekeli chose here, the fact that he was inspired by his own piece for a concert band to add lyrics and to have a chorus sing it. But kind of, I think mostly when composers write new pieces, they are often inspired by found texts that mean something to them, that they read and thought, oh, this is really inspirational. I need to write more. I need to extrapolate on this musically, but instead he takes the music and extrapolates the meaning of the music and turns that into text for himself. So I find that that's a really interesting reversal of a process, that it's not unique in itself. I'm sure that other composers have done that, but it is more unique, I think, than the typical process, at least of what we hear composers discuss. And if we look at the other songs that we've learned so far this semester, right, with Lauritsen, that was a religious text that he drew from. And then with Eric Whitaker, he drew from Kipling, from Kipling's like a fairy tale. And a lot of the music that we sing regularly in person for symphonic choruses is, a lot of religious texts as well. And then also like for Spectre's Bride, that was like a fun Czech folk tale. So it's usually found text that is then set to music. So it's an interesting reversal of this. The music also, the music and the poem were written during the Iraq War. This is also kind of, I think, what inspired Tekeli to write this music and also the words in addition. So he was trying to express kind of the exhaustion with the conflict and the length of the war. And so the text has a very clear, has very clear themes of anti-war and anti-violence, and ultimately kind of a prayer for peace. So let's go ahead and open your music, and let's kind of talk through a couple things, maybe sing a little bit as well, as we explore this piece. And you'll have recognized too, the Earth Song does not begin with the Star Trek theme song, as you were all posting in chat that the very couple of the first sections of the concert band recording sounded like Star Trek to us, which was really fun and exciting. I'm not a Trekkie, so I did not make that association when I listened to it. But yeah, so we start kind of right when we were all posting about warmth and serenity, and that kind of it feels like a nice warm hug, doesn't it? So the first few words that we have: sing, be, live, and see. I'm actually going to take these AirPods out now because it's only to be used when I'm sharing sound and not playing the piano. But this opening section here, just listen to how this motive really just kind of rocks back and forth a little bit here. So here we go. I'll do my best on the piano. Actually try singing that. If you weren't singing and just kind of listening as I play through that and kind of looking at your music, go ahead and join me this time. So sing along. I'll give you your first notes. So basses, basses. You go. For your first couple notes, tenors. Sing. And then altos. Sing. You resolve a little bit later, or you move, rather not resolve, but you move a little bit later than the other voices, and then sopranos. So once again, we have basses, tenors, altos, and sopranos. Sing with me this time. Here you go. 1, 2, 3, and. 1, 2, 3, off. 2, 3, altos. 1, 2, 3, and. 2, 3, off. 1, 2, 3, and we'll pause there again for now. So it does kind of have this kind of like rocking back and forth feeling, this rocking motive that does feel very kind of meditative and contemplative, doesn't it? As we're singing through these words, and it almost feels like, you know, if you ever have a personal mantra to try to get you through difficult times, if you're approaching something that, you know, an important job interview or anything, or something important in your life that you're approaching, and you want to kind of steel yourself to approach it and you know, follow through and step through with it. Or if you're just struggling through maybe something difficult in life, we often have kind of personal mantras. Have you ever kind of repeated one to yourself internally, trying to kind of steel yourself to get through everything? This almost feels like a little bit of a mantra. And the fact that we have these kind of clashing chords here, right, as we were singing through here, you notice that the tenors, altos, and the sopranos all have clustering notes here, and the that very last held note of each one of these, right? And then right here. So the tenors, altos, and sopranos are all singing notes that are right next to each other. And that happens too with the next couple of ones as well. So it's almost like we're like trying to repeat this mantra to ourselves to, you know, steel ourselves through the strife here. I also wanted to point out too the crescendo decrescendos that we have written in here, right? And I notice where the decrescendo ends, right? We don't continue the decrescendo over that long note all the way through the end of the tie, but it stops right at the bar line around. And I think it sounds like from what I've read, Kelly tends to be a very particular and precise composer in terms of the way that he notates his music. So I think that we can draw inference that that is supposed to have, he didn't mean to draw a decrescendo that went all the way to the end there. So it's not that we should kind of like, diminuendo al niente, so get softer until you can't hear anything, right? Until nothing. But decrescendo, have that crescendo decrescendo to kind of lean into those notes, the moving notes, and then, kind of have a stillness on those long notes as you sing through. So let's sing through this opening section one more time together, kind of focusing on this sing, if I'm singing the soprano line and decrescendo, but still stay strong. So let's sing through this again and see if you can kind of find that like leaning into that sensation through that crescendo and then that decrescendo out of it as well. So once again, basses, tenors, altos, and sopranos. 1, 2, 3, and. 1, 2, 3, and lean into it. Crescendo, and then decrescendo out of it. 1, 2, 3, and. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, off. So that's this kind of opening section that you start to, we are introduced to this kind of rocking motive. Then our sopranos, if you heard in the concert band version, in the original arrangement, the horns had this beautiful solo, and the sopranos get to sing this. So everyone go ahead and sing the soprano line with me. From this dark, here we go. 1, 2, go. This dark, stormy hour, the wind it stirs, the scorched earth cries out in vain. And we'll pause there for a moment. So the sopranos have this beautiful melody here with a nice kind of two measures, and then 4 measures. So I think Ming talked about this with our last cycle, right? Where we have this kind of phrasing where we have 2 measures that are together. This dark, stormy hour. And then we have another 2-bar kind of little phraselet. The wind it stirs. And then the next few measures all together, I would kind of call it a 4-bar phrase, although it's really kind of like a 3-bar phrase with a little extra phraselet. But this next section is twice as long, right, with the 4-bar phrase. The scorched earth cries out in vain. And then the echo, in vain. So that nice echo there. And once again, too, you see these really lovely crescendos and decrescendos through this as well. So there's still a lot of ebb and flow with our dynamics and with the fluidity of the sound as we sing through this. Meanwhile, while the sopranos are singing this melody, if you look in the lower voices, the bass, the tenors, and the altos, they continue with this kind of rolling motive that we heard earlier, right? Just a second earlier. Oh, sorry. And then turning the page, we have then I'll try to sing the soprano line on top of it so you can kind of hear where we are in context while the lower voices are singing. So we have the wind it stirs, right? So we have this kind of the bum, bum, bum that we still had from the sing. So this motive, once again, this kind of mantra, this kind of personal prayer is kind of underneath all of this, underneath the melody that is kind of shepherding us through here. And then if you notice at the bottom of page 4, as we were kind of singing right where we stopped, right at measure 16, we have this same idea again. So we have the melody line with the sopranos with the kind of rolling motive underneath. But I also want to draw attention to which words are emphasized as we sing this kind of rolling motive. So go ahead and look with me back down to the bottom of page 3. You'll notice the basses, tenors, and the altos get to sing this dark. Right, so the word dark is kind of emphasized with that motive. And then on the top of the next page, this motive again emphasizes the word wind. The wind it stirs. And then after this beautiful melody, which I can't play very well all parts on the piano on this section, but after the scorched earth cries out, and then we have again, in vain, we have in vain, vain. Then the word war. And then it relaxes for power for a moment. Then again, the motive for the word blind. Right, so we have this motive again, and then as we continue with the sopranos and the tenors singing this melody, the torn heart cries out, and then the word pain. One more time, this kind of motive returns again, like this. So it's almost through all of these things, through the darkness, through the wind, through the, the scorched earth cries out in vain, in pain, through war and power and blind, through all of this, we are still kind of repeating this mantra to try to find motivation to kind of move through and find some kind of refuge, right? And then right where we stopped, go ahead and look at the bottom of page 5. The basses are kind of pausing for a moment and we have just upper voices singing. Notice, in the original concert band version, this was the moment where the horns, kind of all the lower brass stopped for a moment, and the woodwinds were just kind of sparkling, feeling this kind of stillness, right? So listen, I hope I can play this. Just listen to this next section. So we have, but music and singing have been my refuge, and music and singing shall be my light. This next section here. So we have, sorry. And then the basses join again in a higher register, right? And it sounds like sorry, a little crunchier than that. Right on the word light, it really does feel like at that moment that there's like a nice sonic light that's shined on that moment through that chord as well. But through the lighter voices here, right, all singing in a kind of a higher register. Meanwhile, the altos are kind of offering us this stillness, right? I know everyone is saying, oh, the poor altos. But you are representing this refuge, this stillness through this, right? Music, singing, right? So you're saying that even through all of this, this war and power that blinds and blur, you are that supportive force. So don't ever feel like just because you have a bunch of Fs in a row that it's not any less important, altos. But I do also want to draw your attention to the dynamics, because it's marked at piano here now, right? So soft, but we don't have these same crescendo decrescendos, this ebb and flow through this section. It's just a nice stillness. It's the only section of the music that doesn't have that ebbing dynamics, and it's a sense of security and prayer and comfort through this. And so as we're singing the words, music and singing have been my refuge, and music and singing shall be my light. As if it's the mantra, exactly, yeah, Lisa, nice. So as if, you know, this is kind of our new mantra even, or finding, you know, we're finding security through music. We're finding our refuge, our sanctuary through this section. And then go ahead and look with me at the bottom of page 6, right? A light of song, shining strong, alleluia, alleluia. And then we do, in the lower voices, we actually do have this kind of rolling motive again, right? Let me see again if I always gives me a second, because piano, as you know, is not my first instrument, but I'm doing my best. Here we go. We have sorry, but you get the idea. We still have that kind of bum 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 ba-dee-da movement through this, even though it seems like, you know, like we're singing the words, a light of song, shining strong, alleluia. So that musical motive, that is our mantra, is like we've kind of arrived upon a new meaning to it. Like we've repeated it to ourselves. We've found the refuge through music, and we've found a sense of stillness and peace and security through that as well. Alleluia, as it says in the song. Through darkness and pain and strife. And then towards the end, again, go ahead and look with me at the bottom of page 7, or the top system last measure of page 7. We once again come back to our original opening music, where we have, sorry. The sopranos are lower down in our range, altos, tenors, basses are all kind of lower. We found a sense of peace and serenity and security, I suppose. So this mantra, or this personal prayer, has guided us through the tricky times, right? So it's almost as if, you know, through the poem, our speaker kind of goes through this journey. And musically, we also experience that as well. So the way that Tekeli paints all of these different lines, and the way that he set the music, or sorry, rather, the way that he wrote the text to encapsulate the music. I think that this is a really interesting insight on perhaps what the music meant to him maybe as he was writing it, right? The fact that we get the text second as opposed to the text first and then the music. It's a really, really interesting reversal and a great insight into maybe his process. So now that you have suffered through my piano playing, I would love for us to actually listen to the choral version together. And sing along, or, you know, actually I invite you to just listen if you like and observe your score as it goes by, or I invite you to sing along too as well. So whichever one most inspires you at the moment. But let me share my sound once again. I'm putting in my AirPods so that my sound doesn't, I think I've discovered that the sound, my microphone and my speaker on my computer are a little bit too close together. Maybe that's I'm troubleshooting, but I know that the music has sounded a little warbly before, but these AirPods seem to fix that problem. Let me actually, instead of just showing my sound, I'm going to share my screen so we can watch Voces 8 sing through this, or sing with Voces 8, but you can kind of watch their breathing and their cues, their visual cues as you kind of sing through, or just listen to this as we experience the song with all of this in mind. All right, here we go. You really do feel kind of at peace at the end, don't we? What a beautiful, beautiful song. And then I'd like to share, I think, a quote of Tekeli's about this piece. and about the poem, kind of to close out the discussion and the introduction to the song. I hope that you're excited to continue to study this together over the next few weeks. So he wrote, "I knew I had to write the poem myself, partly because it is not just a poem, but a prayer, a plea, a wish, a bid to find inner peace in a world that seems eternally bent on war and hatred. But also the poem is a steadfast declaration of the power of music to heal. In the end, the speaker in the poem discovers that through music, he is the embodiment of hope, peace, the song within the song. Perhaps music has the power not only to nurture inner peace, but also to open hearts and ears in a world that desperately needs love and listening." And I know that that's also something that, quote over, this is Julia talking now, but, this is also a period of strife, which I know that we have talked a lot about together as well, but this is, music and like every Monday with BCCO has been my refuge, as I'm sure it's been all of your refuge as well. So being able to, sing through this and kind of study this piece, it's almost like a reflection of, I think, what we're all feeling right now as well, and the journey that we may have been on together throughout this past year. It's weird that it's March and we're already at the anniversary, right, of the first lockdown. So yes, well, that concludes at least the introduction to Earth Song. So Ming, do you have any final thoughts, or I'll pass it back to you if you have anything to share?
Sure. No, I just, these are really wonderful works, and thank you, Julia, for that wonderful exploration of it. When we first, I think, looked at all of these works and we listened to them, some of them might have characteristics that are similar to others, and when you start diving into them, they're so completely different. And like we were mentioning at the beginning of rehearsal, both these have to do with song, right? Song. And so the Earth Song, and then of course the Angels Song. And so they are both connected in that sort of motive and theme between the two works, but they really honestly couldn't be more different. And one has this sort of comfort, one has this more direct depiction of the poem itself. And I think it's going to be it's going to be very rewarding, I should say, diving into these works, because again, the signifying thing for a masterwork, in my eyes at least, is that, from the very beginning, that there's parts of it that you immediately connect to, but the deeper that you go into it, the more you find. And both these works really have this, even though the Ticelli is it Italiano like that?
I think it's, Ticelli. I watched an interview where he said, "Hello, my name is Frank Ticelli." So,
so Franco Ticelli is much more accessible directly because of the harmonies, but both of them are incredibly effective. And again, just like the Whitaker and the Lauridsen, who seem similar, but in fact are actually very different, I think these are also two very different pieces, and gives us a really nice scope of what chamber chorus music is about. So I think we're going to end there, but next week we're going into sectionals. We're going to dive into these works and work on some of the detail about how these works achieve some of the musical traits that we explored today. And, they're both wonderful contemporary works. So feel free to unmute and chat for a little bit. But with that, we will end formally rehearsal. And have a good week, everybody.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you to you both.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye, Honora.
Very comforting.
Bye, Laura, Spencer.
Bye, Mom.
Congratulations, Martha.
Yes, Martha, congratulations.
Where is she?
Wherever you are, if you're still on.
Bye-bye.
Why are we congratulating her?
The new grandbaby.
Baby, yeah.
She held the newborn in her arms. I'm envious. I would love to be holding a
Bye.
baby right now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.
What well-chosen material we have this semester.
Beautiful. Thank you for choosing these two pieces.
My kind of music.
Really beautiful.
It's so beautiful. Lovely.
Unique.
Stay well and safe all.
Yeah.
Two.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Kitty.
Hi there.
Bye. And bye.
See you later.
Okay.
These pieces are so watery. You're just taking a bath in them.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night, Ju.
Thank you,
Good night, Julia.
Julia.
Good night. See you next
Always
Monday.
a treat.
Thank you.
Well, you have a good week, Roy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.